Hey Mitch, it's been a good few years. You got the whole ponytail going. I mean, lockdown's been hard on all of us. I totally get it. I won't lie, I'm impressed, guys. But just be careful with the dumbbells. The last thing you want is to trip over a dumbbell. I've done it before, it sucks. So I've been playing a lot of Pokemon games this past year. As with many of you, it's something I grew up with starting all the way back in 1997 when the television series and first game, Red version, roughly came out. A couple of months ago, I recalled one game that has since been almost forgotten with the Pokemon franchise, which is quite crazy given how popular the trading game has become, especially in recent years. You guessed it, I'm talking about the original classic Pokemon the trading card game for Game Boy Color that came out in Japan first in 1998, and later in US, Europe and Australia in 2000. I had a sudden urge to go back and play it again, and it was still as enjoyable as when I first picked it up, although the feeling of playing anything as a kid can't really compare to when you're an adult. Then it struck me, this is one game that Nintendo didn't do a proper remake for. I mean, they technically did two for Red and Blue version with Fire Red and Leaf Green, and more recently with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. I got a fun idea for remaking the classic 2D game, but in a current 3D game engine. In my case, Unity. It was also a challenge for me as a relatively newbie game developer because I haven't ever built a card game engine, and so I embarked on what was going to become a fun yet challenging journey over the next 3 months. Before we begin, guys, if you're new to the channel or just dropping by, consider subscribing. I will be doing more remake videos like this, as well as working on my own games, which I will be doing game devlogs for. With that, let's begin. The first task was making the player. If you recall, the original character from the game was a boy called Mark. Apparently that was his name. What I do remember, however, is he had an iconic bandana. Now, instead of designing this character from scratch in Blender to achieve my goal, I had to be smart, or at the very least resourceful in my approach. So I found this very handy model resource site that has all the original characters, buildings, NPCs and Pokemon themselves. So I thought the player from Pokemon X and Y actually somewhat resembled the player from the trading card game. I imported this character into Blender, but there was still something missing. I found this ideal model of a bandana on TurboSquid and began making it resemble the original with some texture painting. And we had our player. However, he looked the part, but we were missing animations. Now the good news is that the models come with the rig on the resource site, but they don't provide the animations. So in comes our trusty friend Mixamo. And just like that, we had a working player character. I made this simple enough movement script using the character controller that comes with Unity, and we could now move around an empty, desolate terrain. The next step was to figure out how exactly we could map out the original 2D world onto a 3D plane. If you recall in the game, Mark started off at Professor Mason's lab, where he would be given an initial deck of cards with the goal of obtaining the legendary Pokemon cards and becoming the world's greatest Pokemon trading card game player. In order to do this, he had to defeat 8 club leaders or masters to obtain medals, which the player required in order to challenge the 4 Grand Masters. All of this sounds quite familiar to a game formula which we had come to love back in the late 90s and early 2000s with the original Pokemon games. And this trusty game formula has stayed with us to this day, albeit with some recent innovations over the last couple of years. So in essence, the world mainly comprised of Professor Mason's lab, 8 clubs, the Pokemon Dome, Challenge Hall, and the memorable Ishihara's house, all populated on a lone island somewhere far away. This actually made for a very nice yet simple setting. I thought this lended itself perfectly for making use of Unity's terrain tool, and so that's what I did. I sculpted the whole island using all the handy features of the terrain tool, like setting the height to make the iconic volcano towering over the Fire Club, as well as the tree painter to make the green forest where the grass club was situated, and some cactuses or cacti, because I just can't accept cactuses as a word, where the rock club is situated. I used the terrain tool in combination with some very nice textures and models I found on the Unity Asset Store to really start to make the island match the original game. The map consisted of a rocky desert terrain where the Fire Club and Rock Club resided, a grassy mainland, and a dense forest where the Grass Club was. For the buildings, I originally used the same Pokemon Resources site to find some matching buildings like the Pokemon Gym, where I could slightly tweak the models in Blender and then remap the textures using higher resolution textures I found from various sites. And I have to say a special mention to cgbookcase.com because they were one of the few I found quite easy to navigate and no issue to simply download 4K textures. So I would recommend them if you're looking for any high resolution textures. I was quite happy with the results I got. That said, it didn't work for every model I found, and I wanted to get a bit more creative, so I decided to go into Blender and build some of the gyms using a combination of primitive objects as well as some assets I found where it suited. I did spend quite a bit of time on the terrain and clubs, and it was time to move on to the meat of the operation here, which was creating the card gaming and duel system engine, as well as the dialogue system to be used in tandem. The Pokemon trading card game gameplay in essence involves a duel between two players, each possessing a deck of 60 cards. The decks are shuffled and each player draws 7 cards. Upon shuffle, both players are asked to select an active Pokemon card, which must be a base card, and select up to 5 bench Pokemon after that. Once completed, up to 6 prizes are set and a coin is flipped to determine which player will go first. Each turn the player would draw 1 card, and the turn ends when the player either attacks or ends their turn themselves. If the Pokemon card receives damage, a damage counter is added to the card. There are 2 ways to win a match. The first player to take all the prize cards wins, or if either player has no more bench Pokemon to play, the other player wins. Since the core of the gameplay mechanic involved updating a deck of 60 cards through the course of the match, I needed a solid way to manage and track cards as each player took their turn. I decided very early on that I would use lists to store the deck of 60 cards and then update that list when, for example, a card was drawn or moved to the bench. This, combined with something called eye enumerators, is what I used to manage the turn-based combat. Basically, eye enumerators allow you to delay actions while the rest of your code runs. Kinda like a co-pilot. It was an analogy that was used to explain it to me, and it's probably the best understanding I can provide you of eye enumerators, because let's be real, I don't know what I'm talking about. There were 5 core scripts that did most of the heavy lifting. The card game manager handled all of the players' cards in different lists, including tracking which cards were in the player's hand, on the bench, in the discard pile, and which was the active Pokemon card. It also dealt with shuffling the deck. To shuffle the cards, I used what's known as Knut's algorithm, which I found out about in Joseph Hawking's book in Unity in Action. In addition, the card game manager had some shared logic, such as handling what happens when both the player and opponent Pokemon cards receive damage, faint, use a potion, as well as handling win and lose states. The opponent AI script handled the same list but for the opponent deck, and also had additional logic for identifying which card to play as the active card, place on the bench, identify if a trainer card was in the hand, and if it could be played. Since user input was required for the player, I built a combination of a UI listener script and a battle controller script to take the user's input on click, for example, to play an active Pokemon card. The battle controller script basically used on mouse down, enter and exit to identify when the player mouse was over a particular card, and sent that feedback to the UI listener, which then dictated what would happen to the card we played. For this to work, and in fact for any of the scripts to work, another vital script was required. That was something which would hold all the card information. For this, I created a Pokemon card stat script which held details on each individual card, such as the card type, attack, HP, and evolution line. Based on the information held in the Pokemon stat script, I was able to flesh out the opponent AI script. You see, in the Pokemon TCG game, a player can only play a base card and then evolve it in the following turn, if they possess the evolved form. So I added logic that both the player and the opponent could only set their bench and active cards with base type Pokemon. Following the first turn, the opponent would then cycle their hand to identify if they possessed an energy card of the same type as their active Pokemon and would play that card. If not, they would then cycle their bench for a matching type. They would then search for a matching evolution card in the same manner. They would also check to see which trainer cards were in their hand and if they could be played. For example, if their active Pokemon's current HP was less than their max, the AI would then play a potion. The Pokemon stats script also included detail on each Pokemon card's attack, as well as the type and colorless energies required to make an attack. Now, I did keep this mechanic quite simple due to the time constraints and the fact that this is the first card game I've ever made, so I didn't incorporate things like effects of the attack as well as weakness to types, but maybe something I can build on in the future. With the mechanics in place, the next step was to make the card. For this, I used Blender to make a card model and then found the original base set 1-2 as well as the Jungle and Fossil cards to apply as texture, and I was very happy with the results. In order to simulate the card shuffle, I broke up the cards into 3 groups of objects and animated them in Blender. I also made this damage counter by messing around with the shader tool in Blender. Next, I thought it'd be cool to make a sort of 3D duel table and had the idea that this could be something the player is rewarded with at different stages of the game. I really enjoyed building the duel table and ended up spending a bit too much time on this. And we couldn't forget the iconic Pikachu coin. I used some old school textures to make both the duel table and the Pikachu coin, with an animation for flipping the coin. Finally, to reward the player, after each duel I made a booster pack in Blender by following a really good tutorial by Blender's Secrets, which essentially allows you to vacuum pack objects. I had seen this video before and I figured this method would fit well with booster packs to make them look more realistic, and I was quite happy with the end result. At this point the game was shaping up nicely, but something was missing. The game wasn't fully 3D yet. One thing I've always liked growing up as a kid is how the models popped out of the cards in series like Yu-Gi-Oh! So I thought it could be a cool feature to have the Pokemon pop out of the cards cards when they were played to make the game a bit more exciting. I ended up using Lean Tween for this, by the way. I had one massive problem though. We were talking about 150 Pokemon models that I would need, as well as the different animations. And while I was able to get all the models from the Pokemon Resources site, they didn't have the animations, which would take me pretty much 6 months to make multiple animations for each Pokemon. Now originally I did try to pull the animations from the 3DS system, based on this forum I found out about, but well... So I just gotta unzip the Boot 9 strap, then I gotta open up the Locomotion pack, then I gotta figure out what on earth I just said. So I said to myself, what if we go with 2 simple animations for each Pokemon and focus on 20 Pokemon? So that's what I set out to do. That's about 40 animations, and while that's still a lot, I felt like it was necessary to make this game a bit more fun. I also leveraged Mixamo where I could, and this really helped me with the fighting type Pokemon, although some weight painting was needed to smooth out the animations. The 2 animations I felt were absolutely necessary were an idle animation when the Pokemon was left idle, and one for attacking. This process took me about 2 weeks or so to complete, including updating the weight painting and importing everything into Unity and setting it up. Previously, I had only known how to use Unity's particle system, but after watching a tutorial or 2 on how to use the VFX tool in Unity, I made a grass attack, a fire attack, a water attack, and a fighting attack, and I felt this was sufficient for this project. With that in mind, at this point I was also starting to realize that after 2 or so months of development, I needed to give myself a more realistic goal as to what I could fully accomplish, having set to complete this project in 3 months at the beginning. So I decided that the focus would be on 2 different segments. The first being the opening scene with Professor Mason where we could select our starter deck, and the second being the Fight Club match with Mitch in order to get the Fight Club medal. For the opening scene, I would need to build a research lab where the protagonist could meet Professor Mason and be presented with 3 starter decks to choose from. If you recall, similarly to the original Red and Blue version, you're given a choice between the original 3 starter types. In this case, it was the Charmander and Friends deck, the Squirtle and Friends deck, and the Bulbasaur and Friends deck. To start, I found some good assets from the Unity asset store that fit our research lab theme. I spent some time setting up the research lab, and I also used the assets I made for the cards, decks, and booster pack to set up a gaming card table. However, there were 2 key items I needed for this scene. The first was Professor Mason. Now I did some research. Now, see what I did there, because he's a professor and I did some and after a bit of searching, I did find this image. However, if I wanted a fully designed Professor Mason, it would take quite a bit of time, and we were already short on that. So in comes our trusty Pokemon resource site. I managed to find a model for Professor Oak from the recent Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Now I could have just pasted him in, but I had the idea that it might be funny if Professor Mason was actually Professor Oak in disguise this whole time. So well, that just led me down this path. Yoink, I'll take these, thank you very much. Just a bit of hair makeover here. Don't worry, you look amazing. I mean, I like the new look. So I did try to match a similar hairstyle to the Professor Mason image I found, and I even gave him some glasses, and honestly, I was quite happy with how it turned out. For the animations, I again went back to our friend Mixamo, and then set up the animations in Unity's Animator tab, which we could call through our code. We also couldn't forget Professor Mason's assistant, and well, this is how that went. You know, hair grows, it does that. With the scene and characters pretty much set, we now had to set up 3 starter decks as well as a way to select our decks and the UI for that. Here is the script that I wrote for that. Oh, and I almost forgot, one commonality which I mentioned earlier is the dialogue system. I used the same dialogue handler script which I learned about originally for my first 2D game, that I never finished, and built upon it for the current FPS game I'm working on. You can check out on that progress in my last video, by the way. It required a bit of tweaking here and there for a dueling system, however. And voila, upon walking in, the professor would wave at us and we could now walk up to the professor and have a chat. He would then ask us to select our deck. Now it had all built up to this. We had a full end-to-end card battle system set up to duel the opponent, but we had no opponent. As you can imagine, it was time to dig up some more model lookalikes. This will do nicely. Oh look, a Gee! Why thank you, good sir. Okay, to be fair, I went in a bit of a different direction for the look of Mitch, but I quite like how he turned out. He sort of looks like Terry Silver from Cobra Kai, and I absolutely love it. Now it was time to add his students. I gave them different coloured belts to reflect their student status and rank. I do apologise because I know there were 3 of his students you had to beat in order to fight Mitch, but I only ended up making 2. And I just don't really care. I don't care. I just don't. I don't care. Next, we needed to design the internal gym. I took a map of the original Fight Club from the Game Boy Color game and used that as a reference. I found some really nice textures for the Fight Club mat, as well as some glossy wooden texture for the entrance of the club. Then for the walls, I quite like the white brick texture to give it that feel of a dojo. I found some dumbbells and benches, as well as a dumbbell rack to complete the design. And that was it. We had the club leader, his students, and the club itself ready to go. Now I just had to integrate the battle scene I set up for the duels with the club leader, as well as the reward system to reward the player if he should win. I did this by setting up a dialogue to battle transitioner which held information on the list of cards the leader had. I made this a singleton so that it would persist into the battle scene. In order to start the duel, we called the dialogue to battle transitioner at the end of the last line of dialogue in our dialogue handler we mentioned earlier. The opponent AI would then look for the dialogue to battle transitioner and set the list of cards to be the opponent's cards. With this framework, I could set up more club leaders and give them decks that can be passed into the opponent AI script to start the duel. I also swapped out our placeholder capsule for Mitch and made sure he was scaled and orientated correctly for the duel. The dialogue to battle transitioner also had 2 sets of dialogue that would be triggered after the duel. Depending on the outcome, our card game manager would tell the DBT script, because I'm really tired of saying dialogue to battle transitioner and I really need to name my scripts better, to either play opponent won or lost dialogue. If we played the lost dialogue, as if that's ever going to happen, then Mitch would just tell us we need to train at his dojo to get better. However, if we were to win, the win dialogue would play. And then comes in our reward script. With the reward script, I set it up so that after the win dialogue plays, it calls the reward script, which effectively instantiates 2 booster packs and a randomized set of 11 cards, one after the other, just like in the original 2D game. Currently it's just fully randomized, so you can get more than 1 shiny card, but with more time I can make it match the standard 1 shiny 2 energy card formula, although we'd all love to get multiple shinies in 1 pack. I also ended up making a Fight Club medal, but this was literally the last thing I did and I couldn't squeeze it into the final build of the game, so I just wanted to show you the medal that I made. And finally, the original game had quite a good and yet underrated soundtrack. I wanted to replicate this in the game, but I also didn't want to get sued by Nintendo, so I ended up bringing it into Audacity and playing around with it for a bit. For the rest of the sound effects, I found some decent audio in freesound.org, and I edited those along with my voice, which sounded like this. After a long and exhausting 3 solid months of work, combined with working a full-time job, I was really excited for this build. I could finally see the culmination of all my hard work. And with that, I'm excited to show you guys the end result. I know it's not perfect, but it is the foundation which could be used to build out the full 3D version of the game. Alright, let's go. Man, I wish the weather was this good. I made a very poor decision in my clothes because I am boiling. Does anyone have any water? Anyone home? I got a Charmander deck and I'm ready to use it. No? You're saying the programmer hasn't set up the full gym yet? Okay. I think he's a lazy piece. Looks like no one's at the grass club either. Really strange. Guess I'll go check out what Mitch is doing. So this is the fighting club. Place isn't totally intimidating at all. You guys seem very friendly. Hey Mitch, you've changed, and so you got some new friends. So you have defeated all my pupils. Let's see if you have what it takes to inherit the legendary Pokemon cards. It's okay, we got Charmander, we've got 2 fire energies, we should be good to go. I mean, it's only Hitmonlee and he needs 2 fighting energies before he can attack, so we should be fine. Nice, we got Bill. Okay, please, Bill, give me something good. Very nice. A fire energy and a Charmander. I will take that. Yeah, let's play the super potion. What are you gonna do now? What are you gonna do now, Hitmonlee? This attack should do 30 damage, and we're good to go. Yeah, I definitely regret saying what I said earlier. Please do not do the spinning kick. Do the spinning kick. Alright, this is not going according to plan, but we still have 3 prize cards. Oh, come on, Charmeleon. We got a Charizard. We can do this. What are you gonna do now? We got a Charizard. We should definitely win this. Although I'm not sure if I've got enough energy cards. He did the flying kick. He did the flying kick again. I give you 2 animations, Hitmonlee, and you're doing the flying kick just to humiliate me. I really need another fire energy. I think this might be it, guys. Oh, now you do the freaking upper kick. That was my Charizard. I don't even know why I'm playing anymore because I've lost this. Don't you kame, Mitch. Or should I say Terry Silver? I just got defeated by my own AI. That is actually very basic. Oh my god, we actually drew the Charizard. This is the best run. Well, actually last one we drew a Charizard, but we didn't have enough energies. And to be fair, I did prepare both Mitch's deck and my deck to be competitive. I didn't want this to be easy. There's only 2 Charizards in my deck, and I got one of them. And Mitch has a good few Hitmonlees, as you can see in Hitmonchan. So this is a fair fight, and that's why he beat me the first time. Not because I'm an idiot or anything. Not at all. I didn't lose to a basic AI that I made. It's not because I'm dumb. It's because I'm really good at putting decks together. That is the story we're going with. Right, don't even think about doing anything, because I'm just going to do 100 attack here and finish you off, because I have 4 energies. Now, because this is just the foundation of the game, guys, I don't have the detail behind all of the attacks. Like, obviously, I get to keep all my energy cards, whereas typically Charizard would discard 1 fire energy. And I know that because I spent so much time developing this game. But we've just defeated Mitch. Yeah, Mitch, I will not be training at your dojo because I just bested you. And it did not take me a few goes to beat you. I totally did not cut that up and lose several times to you. Here, take this. It's the fighting medal. You'll find the secrets to the decks of this club encrypted in it. Mark won the fighting medal, which I definitely totally designed and worked the first time that I developed this. And we get our 2 booster packs. Let's see what we get here. Please be good. Please be good. Give me a shiny. I want a shiny. Alright, gentlemen, it's been a blast. Stay safe. Watch out for those dumbbells. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification icon to get notified on my next video. I also have a Discord set up if you want to join that to give me ideas on my next video, as well as ideas for my current FPS game that I'm working on, The Ark. And if you'd like to contribute further to my game development and the video content, I do have a Patreon where you can subscribe. And as a nice bonus, I do have a tier on Patreon where I'll give people any published games I complete for free as a way to say thank you. As always, everyone, drink some coffee, code, do good in the world, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Peace out.